yet another exciting session of the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce Trade Diversification Committee Vodcast, which John and I often refer to as the John and John Show, or John Squared, or who knows what else they call us, John. But
That's right.
anyway, we have been doing a lot of these with the singular intent of trying to educate small business around how to diversify trade because of the obvious consequence of tariffs that are happening, tariff policy that is coming out of the US. How does one diversify one's trade if you happen to be losing trade from these tariffs, the tariff war, and all the other wars that are going on that seem to manifest themselves pretty regularly under this government? We've been very lucky today to secure a guest that I got to know from the Sydney Breakfast Club, industry networking group that's very vibrant on the peninsula. And Edward, I've known now for, well, I don't know, 3, 4 years, maybe longer. A sales expert, okay, knows everything about sales. And whereas people say I know about sales, I don't really know the mechanic. I'm more of a promoter and a marketer. I can sell. Edward's got the sales thing, really nailed. And so, for reasons John Trelevan's going to explain right now, that's something that's very, very mission critical to establishing a successful trade relationship.
Yeah, I mean, Edward, it's a pleasure to meet you in this context, and I look forward to our conversation. And I spent 32 years in the Foreign Service. My posting in Hong Kong was the most transformative in my life because I ran into the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, like the Trade Commissioner Service, and a man by the name of Len Dunning, who had created that organization for the government of Hong Kong back a long time ago in the 70s. And Len's constant message to his staff, who, like the Trade Commissioner Service, are not in business, right? They facilitate business, but they're not in it. But his constant message to his staff was, remember that in business, nothing happens until somebody buys something somebody else is selling. And so whatever his staff did in their role with the Trade Development Council should be leading to a sale. Now, there's a sales funnel. There's a science to all this, and I've used some of the numbers from what used to be the Canadian Professional Sales Association, which I believe is no longer in extant. And when I was in Ottawa on home postings, for example, one of the groups that worked for me published an international trade business plan for Canada, which sounds very grand, but really it was just an attempt to get all the trade associations, as many as we could, 10 provinces, to at least agree on the time of day. And in the course of doing that work, we regularly surveyed businesses about what they needed to successfully develop trade abroad. And they wanted 3 things: qualified business leads, competitive intelligence, and, of course, a detailed knowledge of access conditions. Well, many years ago in the 90s, the House of Commons Standing Committee on International Trade did a study of 50 small businesses in Canada who were active in international trade. How did they become active was the researchers' focus. The Commons Committee did not claim that this was, statistically valid. They didn't do 10,000 companies. They took a selection of active firms. And the results were, in my view, both educational and not surprising, but stunning. Of the 50 companies, only 3 or 4 became active as a result of doing a strategic plan, market research, look at the world, identify and execute a program. Several couldn't remember because they're dealing with small business.
Yeah.
And guess what? People move on. But the vast majority of companies, these are Canadian firms from across the country, acting in international trade, became active through the receipt of an unsolicited request for their product. From that moment on, I did my level best to turn the Trade Commissioner service into a lead generating machine. It did not work. I hate to say it. I moved to the Saskatchewan Trade and Export Partnership. They fundamentally do custom market research for their 300 member companies, most of whom are small, and they deliver qualified trade leads to those companies. We're talking right now as the Prime Minister of Canada has returned from yet another international trip. He is tireless, which means large segments of his government are tireless in trying to make real the need for Canada's trade picture to diversify. But the three of us and the interests we represent know that only customers will diversify Canadian trade. And I'm seeking a conversation on the discipline of sales that we can then take into a broader context and, frankly, shape the delivery of services from a number of agencies in this country. And I'm really interested, Edward, in your experience in that sales function and where, well, let me just, I'll do one other little tangent. When I was CEO of the Saskatchewan Trade and Export Partnership, of course, it's an agency that receives about $3 million a year in public money. 80 or 90% of the budget is from the government of Saskatchewan. And of course, governments need to ensure that there's value for money. Well, in the delivery of international trade services, where is the value? How do you? This is not a company. This is not the. How do you demonstrate? And what we did was to take numbers from the Canadian Professional Sales Association on what it costs a Canadian company to do a sales call in an adjoining province. Approximately $250. It's why, this is a long time ago now, but you don't do cold calls in sales, you do your research. Having looked at the internet research, AI and whatnot, what I see today is if you're going to do a business-to-business call that involves a complex solutions-based sale, you're looking at between $500 to $1,000 US. Now that's for a company in the United States calling on a company in the United States. How much does it cost a company in the Saanich Peninsula to make a sales call in Tokyo, Japan? And how many sales calls do you have to make in Tokyo to get one or two actual companies very interested in your product?
So, John, I chatted with Edward a few days ago, and he said, "Give me some sense of what we're going to talk about." Well, I didn't ask him those questions, so I don't know if you'll be able to answer those questions. But why don't we hand over the forum to Edward and let him give us a reaction to our comments?
That's where I'm coming from, Edward. So I'm delighted to hear what you have to say, honestly.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And both Johns, John Jurczyk, too complimentary. I don't know that I'm put myself on that level of pedestal. I do know some things. I have been doing this for a little while, but I don't know everything. And let's make that clear. I don't know everything. I know what I know.
Well, no, we do.
Yeah. Oh, no, we do, John. Between us.
I just want to temper expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have been, selling into various marketplaces, various levels of government, various industries, big, small, what have you, for, better part of 4 decades, if not more. And the big thing that I've noticed over the years is companies, small ones, big ones, they really need to know who they are. So, they have their value proposition, they have their mission statement, they have all those things that they put out there and say, this is who we are. But who are they really? What really are they? Who are they really? And that's something they have to, do a SWOT analysis. We've all heard that. But what makes them who they are? What is their weaknesses? What are the opportunities out there? And what are the threats to what they're doing? So this is something that, I've dealt with over and over again with businesses. They think they're a thing, but they're really not that thing. Right. So we all are a little bit diluted in who we think we are and what we are. And so sometimes we have to look in the mirror and go, who am I really? What am I really good at? What am I not good at? And then concentrate on, enhancing the good, working on the bad. And then, there's other opportunities where you can, move around and become better at something. So companies have to really understand what they're doing. They may be generating what they think is the world's best widget, perhaps, but are they really doing that? What are they really good at? And so identifying that for their own perspective helps them when they get out there and are actually talking to customers who are asking those hard questions. They're not going to get blindsided or promise more than they can deliver, which is the death knell for any organization.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things that find out what they do, what they're really are good at. What are your customers looking for? Who is your customer? Know your customer. So as John Trelevan said, doing the market research for sure, but understanding who they are, what they need. And sometimes they're in the same boat you are, where they don't really know who they are and what they need. And that's where you have to actually ask the questions and ask those open-ended questions. Ask them about their business, how they do things. Really dig into this, because there's an old adage, there's a reason why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should listen twice as much as we talk.
Yes, exactly.
So that's the key. And then building that relationship, you say, how are you going to get that customer in Tokyo? Well, half the time they're going to think you're spam or some sort of scam or something. Seriously, how are you going to get that knowledge? You talked about the trade commissioner. In my past, I have used trade commissioners to help me open doors in international waters, as it were, because they know the people. They have people on the ground there, so they can have someone in their Tokyo office, talk to that company, and have someone in, for instance, the Victoria office, and they can do a cross vetting process. So when the person is reaching out, now it's not so cold anymore. The introduction has been made. It's more of a warm call, and they can have a conversation about what they're offering, what the client potentially is looking for. And now they've taken that, the first barrier down is like, are you real or are you Memorex?
That's right. And I just add one more thing in terms of the eye of the potential customer.
Mm-hmm.
To have an introduction from the Canadian Embassy or a Canadian consulate or the Alberta office or the BC office
Mm-hmm.
adds a huge amount of credibility to we're talking small business coming from Victoria that's never been in Tokyo or Bangkok or Brussels.
Exactly.
The company, where I'm sure where you're going, the company's got to do the sales job. It is not the trade commissioner that does the sales job.
Not at all. They have to do a double sales job, but they have to sell on the trade commissioner locally, show their value, that they're even worth being introduced.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, then the door is open. It's up to them to walk through that door. And, I've said it 100 times, I'd rather have 1 referral than 100 leads.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
Someone else is putting their name forward, their reputation forward to introduce you as someone that you should be dealing with.
Yep.
And it takes time to develop those. You can go out and do all the market research you want, do all the marketing you want, which is great, but everything's still cold. You want to warm them up. And how many touch points does it take to get from the initial introduction to the sale? Each sales is different. You could have 3 or 4, you could have 20 or 30. It could take years, it could take weeks, it could take months.
Yeah.
Right. And each one has its own life.
But I'd reinforce what you just said in the sense that if you're doing, let's say you're going after the Japanese market alone from a Victoria base, it can work.
Yeah.
Supply and demand works. And occasionally you reach a company that desperately needs what you have. But that doesn't happen all the time. And there needs to be some kind of a process. You've got to get to 10 companies to find one that will potentially be a customer.
Yeah.
And in that hunt, those assets abroad can be enormously beneficial.
Right. And you want to tilt your potential closing ratio as high as you can for yourself, and use every asset that you have available to you.
Absolutely. And ensure that the closing ratio is not achieved by lowering your price every time.
No, it's not even an issue.
Yeah, you demonstrate the value. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And the one thing that you have to do with these, any customer, you really need to talk to them. And I find, people, there is a sales process. I don't like the thought that there's an algorithm to sales. Like, if you do this, then you do this, and you say this, and you say that, and there's a particular formula. There's cartoons out there where you look at someone and say, well, sales is a very linear process where it goes from here to here to here to here to here, and then this is the first contact, and here's a sale, and it's all nice and linear. Well, in reality, it looks like this. Like, it's all over the place.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. You want to go north, but you're heading west, and it's one of those things where it's, I know science, you talked about the science of sales. It's as much an art as it is a science.
Yes, it is. I believe that's true. And the further the customer and potential and supplier are apart from each other, either in terms of distance, culture, language, tradition, actually, the more difficult it is for the buyer to put the future of their company in the hands of a component supplier or a technology supplier from Victoria, British Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and that doesn't change whether it's down the street or across the country or across the world. It doesn't change.
Often, I've owned half a dozen of my own businesses. I've been accused of this exact thing I'm going to ask you about. I've been involved with chambers, so I'm familiar with small business. Often, what is required. Okay, so you're solid gold, by the way. I just love what you're explaining to us. Thank you. Sort of the minutia of what actually has to happen when Carney goes. I've just signed a trade deal with Malaysia to actually a company in central Saanich generating revenue. There's such a gap of knowledge. It's extraordinary. Often, however, the parameters and process you've described that are required, that are necessary, that have been validated because of experience, are not bought in by the management, are not bought in by the people running the show, because they think it is linear. Make 5 calls, make 100 calls, you get 5%, and blah, 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 all those. What do you do when you're stuck in that scenario? Besides leave the company, which, folks do. Is there some kind of guidance here, wisdom that you can, for those owners of companies that are going, I just want to hire that cold caller?
Yeah, no, I've dealt with this. I've lived it, and it's an education process, and you have to build the trust with the management that, I know you want to go north, but I'm heading west right now, but we want to go north. And I go, I understand, but I need to get there first so I can go there. You have to trust me. There's a reason for this. And it's hard. So many people that have that linear mind say, it just follows a path. Well, it does, but it doesn't, and that's the science versus the art, because you have to listen. You have to look at, say, each situation is different. You can't say, when the customer says this, you say this. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't say anything. I find so many times that the biggest challenge we have with any customer relation, any interaction, is we're asking questions and they go, I want this. And you say, oh, okay. And so we say, here's a solution for this, right? That's the easy way to do it. Is that the right way? Nothing wrong with asking them, why do you want this? And they're going, well, we want this because we want this and this and this. So, okay, so now you're listening. So you're actively listening. You're not thinking about solution. You're digging into their problem. You're almost like a doctor going, my arm hurts. It hurts when I throw. Okay. Does it hurt when you lift things? Well, yeah. Does it hurt when you do? Right. So we're looking for their pain points. What is their challenge? So when you're asking this, don't be afraid to ask why. Like, I want this because I want to do this. Why do you want to do that? Well, because this will help this and this will help this. All right, but why do you need that? Dig in further and further, and eventually get to the point where you're getting to the real pain point, what really is the issue. And sometimes, surprise enough, the client doesn't know what their real pain point is. They think they do. They've identified we want this, but they haven't dug deep enough internally to find out what they really, really need.
Brilliant.
And
so
there's a strong lesson there for Canadian businesses.
Yeah.
We're very good at producing presentations on our product, PowerPoint, slick. Sometimes we're not very good at arriving at a meeting with a bunch of questions to which we need to seek answers to be sure that what we have to offer is going to meet the circumstance. And along the way, as the Canadian supplier, you are judging the extent to which, in a way, the customer is prepared to pay for your product. Because it turns out his whole plant is shut down for the next 6 weeks unless he gets that from us. Now, that's, of course, a complete exaggeration.
Yeah.
But that's the subtlety of it all.
Yeah, you're talking sort of the difference between a pitchman and a consultative sales professional.
Indeed. Oh, yes.
Right? So there's lots of pitchmen out there that'll just sell whatever it is. I hate the expression, I can sell anything to anyone. I'm going, why would you want to do that? Like, obviously the people don't need your service. They don't want your service, and you've convinced them. That's what gives salespeople a bad name, that exact scenario, right? You want to listen to what they need. You want to be that solutions provider. Say, I can see what you need. Let me help you. Like, when you get right down to it, a good professional salesperson is a problem solver, someone who's helping people.
Oh,
that's what we're there for. We're there to help you. You have a problem. Do I have a solution? I don't know. Let's talk about what your problem is. Like, it can't be so quick that I need this. Well, here's that. And, people all the time are jumping the process. You can't skip steps in the sales process. If you don't
particularly when it's a business to business sale, you can sell hula hoops on a YouTube ad.
Yeah.
But when you get into trying to solve an issue for a company, no.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm talking B2B. I'm not talking B2C.
Yeah, exactly.
Because B2C, someone wants something and it's a particular color.
That's right.
It's not really relevant. It is what it is. But you get
right.
Very emotional. And, there's not saying that every sale is emotional to a point. You're dealing with a person, so there is an emotional point of it. But you have to make sure that the person you're dealing with feels that you understand them. And the only way to do that is to understand them. You can't fake that. I know it's funny, John, but
it's so obvious, and it's like we don't do that. So many people don't do that.
But you can't fake it, and you can't say, "Well, I'm working, to figure out what you need, and I want to find what you need to give you the right solution." It can't be just, wordplay. You have to actually mean it. You have to actually be in their shoes, try to get into their head, and understand what they need, so you can find out what solution you can provide for them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't have the right thing, and you have to go, what? I'm not the right guy. I'm not the right solution for you. You should look at this. I've done that before. I've done it with clients before. I said, what you're looking at buying is not right. Don't buy it. Next year we're coming out with this, and this will suit you better. And I've done that with a client before, and it was a big client. And I said, don't buy this. You don't want it. And they went, are you what? You're a salesman, right? Yeah. You're not selling me something. You're telling me not to buy this. Yeah. You're telling me not to buy it from you. He said, yeah. Don't. And they looked at me like I'd grown another head, obviously. Right?
They're going, year, he's trying to trick me with negative psychology here. I want 10 of them. No, you don't need it. I want 20 of them.
No, but it's funny. So, the next year came around and we talked further. We kept the conversation going and said, okay, this is what you need. This is the right solution. What you're looking at last year was not right. You didn't need it then. This is what you need. And I built the trust, and we just, had a nice long-term relationship. And they were very happy with the solution because it was the right solution. It wasn't because, I need to sell this because I need to hit my quota. That's just the wrong way, the wrong attitude to begin with.
Underlying this whole conversation is the reason, of course, that Canada is so successful in selling to the United States and has been relatively less successful despite many efforts by governments of Canada over the years to diversify our trade. And one of the points John and I are trying to make, as I've said before in this series of discussions, is that only business will diversify our trade. And generally speaking, most businesses don't seek risk; they seek assurance.
Yep.
The U.S. Legal system, English language, ease of travel, all that. So I think Mr. Carney has set a very ambitious goal. $300 billion in trade over 10 years to move to other markets other than the United States. And $1 billion of exports generates about 6,000 jobs. Do the math.
Yeah.
Well, what sales dynamic do we need to create that will make those kind of results at all possible? My goodness, it's a huge challenge. And I said in an earlier broadcast, you can put an athlete on steroids and it'll work for a while, but eventually the athlete will be in big trouble. What Mr. Carney's trying to do, and what we've been challenged to do, is put the whole export community here on permanent steroids for a long time. And to me, that's where the science of the sales process becomes so absolutely vital, because nothing happens until somebody buys something somebody else is selling.
Yeah.
Edward, we run the risk of losing our digital viewers who have a short attention span. So this has been gold. I would like and hope that we can chat with you again.
Absolutely.
But this conversation is not happening anywhere except potentially in the accountant's room of the small business. Where is the sale? And then everyone panics.
Yeah.
It would be, if I can put you on the spot here, and I will, and you might have already stated them through you have, but so I'm a business. I'm now in downtown Sydney. My 30% of sales to the Americans is gone because of costing issues. I now want to diversify. What would be some core pieces of advice, 2 or 3 pieces from obviously a sales perspective, a sales science perspective?
So there's an old adage that it's impossible to get the right answer if you don't know what the question is. Right? So when you're talking to your potential clients, you need to really, really dig in. What is their challenge? What do they really need? And not just, because your widget seems to fit their widget. Like, what do they need? Sometimes you need to adapt. Sometimes at this point, you may need to collaborate with someone else in, another country or another area. Say, we can provide a solution, but let's work together for this solution, because you need not only our product, but someone else's. Sometimes you have to think outside the box, because not everyone has every answer, right? So sometimes you have to do this and go, you really need this. I can provide a portion of this, but let me see what I can do about working with people who are my colleagues / competitors about coming up with a different solution for you. Because it's not always the square peg round hole scenario. Sometimes you can actually make it fit by just changing things a little bit. So people want to buy from people they trust, right? You need to develop this over a period of time. It's not easy. There's no tricks. You can't just say, trust me, I'm honest. Like, what, would I lie to you?
Yes.
And so that's something you have to do. And, to do that, people don't like to, but sometimes you have to, share things about yourself. You have to share your humanity with people. So people are inherently nervous when they're talking to salespeople. They think they're going to be sold something they don't want. They think they're going to be taken advantage of. They think, oh my gosh, I'm going to shake my hands. So if you count your fingers when you get the back, did you get all your fingers back? So your job as a sales consultant professional is to make your clients at ease, build that connection, but have that, you know, genuine interest in them. It can't be fake. It can't be forced. You have to have that real concern for their best interests.
Yes. John, I want to hire this guy for something.
That's right. And Edward, I'm going to go back to something you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because again, as a trade commissioner, one of my constant concerns is that many companies in Canada don't take advantage of that a massive amount of effort the Canadian government makes in placing staff in 160 cities around the world.
Yeah.
Go back to what you said about how the company has to know itself,
right,
in order to sell itself. Well, one of the first things a Canadian firm should be doing if they're interested in international trade, having decided more or less where the market looks good, is be in touch with one or two of the trade commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
But in that letter, in that email, in that text message, they've got to be very specific about what they want out of that market. Broad terms, distributor, assembler, anyway.
Let me stop you for a second, John.
Yeah.
Because, the trade commissioners are more than happy to come to your office. They're more than happy to come and see your plant, see your facility, talk to you about your business. In my previous world, I have brought trade commissioners to my office and said, what do you think? Like, I'm doing this, this, and this. What are your eyes on this? Like, what am I missing? Because they have such a breadth of knowledge and experience. Bring them in, utilize their resources.
Carl Husband is the trade commissioner for the island. Yes, absolutely, I agree. I was looking more from, now you're going to be corresponding with one of these trade posts abroad.
For sure, yeah.
You got to convey to that officer that you've got a very good idea of how you want to appear in that marketplace.
Yeah. Yeah.
His or her job is to determine, well, if that's what you want, here are the options that I can see.
I think the fascinating point that's been brought up here that might not be as obvious to our local community is that there are trade commissioners here.
Yeah.
And so you can, and we have developed a relationship with that person here at Lower Vancouver Island, Kale Husband. And so to Edward's point, bring them in, have them review, just like you said, sometimes double, triple eyes can see things you don't see. They can help with developing the relationship with our trade commissioner in Hong Kong, as it turns out, who they might know as good friends. So all of a sudden, the kind of things Edward's been advising us on are happening. We're building trust.
Can I give you an example from my career as to what can happen when the system works very well?
Perfect.
When I was in Sao Paulo,
say goodbye.
When I was in Sao Paulo a long time ago, the Sao Paulo Stock Exchange decided they wanted to go all electronic, and they were at the chalkboard stage. And they'd heard that the Montreal Stock Exchange had an electronic status indicator board, which was electronic. So the president of the stock exchange reached out to our office. We wrote a memo to the Montreal regional office, just to take your point, Edward, and said, Montreal Stock Exchange, status indicator board. Well, it turned out that the Montreal Stock Exchange was the world's first electronic trading floor. T-scan terminals, electro home TV monitors, the Ferranti Packard status indicator board, the world's first electronic stock exchange. The second all electronic stock exchange in the world was the Sao Paulo Stock Exchange. They went to Montreal, had all those introductions, all the software was Canadian, and we didn't realize it until the Sao Paulo Exchange asked us. And that's when the system works slickly. That Montreal regional office knew their businesses. I remember the memo that came back. And, you know, in 1971, we sold about $1 million worth of high-tech equipment to the second electronic trading floor in the world. The harder you work, the luckier you get. But
Yeah.
that's the kind of work that trade commissioners do.
Yeah. Edward, we will look forward to chatting with you again. You are the sales consultant with Alls Co. Uniforms. I'm going to have all kinds of connection information on this screen.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, we might expand this into potentially sales training for Peninsula Chamber members. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? But thank you so much for this very informative, very expert summary of the
My
sales
pleasure.
process for trade diversification. John Trelevin, thank you so much. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much, Edward.
Yeah,
See you
bye-bye.
at the next Sydney Breakfast Club breakfast.
Sounds good.
Take
See you
care.
guys. Thank you.